Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I'm in a great mood today, and I think it's for a few reasons. For one, I've been doing more walking than I have in a long time, like over an hour a day, just in the neighborhood. And there's this app called the Steps app. And so we've got like a little bit of a family competition going on in the Steps app because you can have other people join and then somebody gets declared the winner. And, you know, I'm competitive, but so far, like my brother Normie's kicking all of our butts. Like this week he had 3 straight days, 25,000 steps, 21,000 steps, 18,000 steps. So I'm not at that level yet, but, you know, I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I'm also in a great mood today because I'm excited about this episode. Couple things have me really excited. Kate Stricklan is going to be joining Susan in our first segment, and she's going to introduce herself, a little bit about her background, and then they're going to talk about the NACAC conference that they both attended, some of the key takeaways, and that conversation went in depth, and so you'll only hear part of it today, and you'll hear more next Monday as well. But I think Kate's gonna really give us a nice new addition. You know, I'm always thinking about diversity. And I know diversity means a lot of different things to different people. But for me, when I say diversity, I'm talking about different perspectives. And so I think it strengthens, you know, your understanding of admissions to have different perspectives. And even all of us on our team, we all learn from each other. And so Kate's going to give us a really nice perspective. CU Boulder, flagship school, and a really interesting school because on the one hand, it can be really selective when you look at like their engineering programs, and business is getting pretty competitive there as well. But then for most of their majors, you know, they're saying yes a lot more than they're saying no. So I think it's really cool that she'll be able to present that national research, you know, university, something we haven't had in our rotation. And so I'm excited to introduce her to you today. Of course, she's been part of the case studies, right? You've been hearing her along with Grace and Hillary, and you'll hear. So I guess this is the Kate episode because you'll get her in the conversation with Susan, and then you'll get her again on the case studies. And that's the other thing I'm really excited about is the big reveal. Who did the committee select? You know, I got an email from somebody that works for a test prep company, but's been listening really attentively to every episode. She's like, I'm sitting on my seat. I can't wait to see who got selected. So it's kind of exciting to me that it's been fun for a lot of you to read the files and be so engaged. And so, yeah, you know, it's not just about who they select. What you'll see, and it's really common, is not everybody agrees on everything. And you'll hear some of that today. You'll hear different opinions expressed. And we saw it as well in the couple hundred of you that went through all this exercise and did the actual voting. There were votes for every one of the candidates. I mean, a lot of votes. Everybody had votes. And that's not uncommon, you know, in the admission process, especially when you're looking at competitive applicants. So excited to bring you that segment today. Before we dive into the conversation with Susan and Kate, a listener sent in a tip. And I'd never seen this tip before. And I loved it. And so it came in originally by email, and I was like, can you put that on SpeakPipe so I can share with everybody? And so she did. And so I'm going to play it for you. And that'll be the next thing you'll hear. And it has to do with a really clever and creative way to prevent your email from being absolutely inundated with all this college stuff. It's a way of kind of organizing like your Gmails when they come in. And so that's the next voice you'll hear. And then right after that, you'll hear Kate and Susan. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, YCBK team. Thank you so much for all you do. I'm an avid listener. I listen to every episode and always seem to pick up a few gems. I wanted to share an easy and quick tip that I implemented this week with my kids who are currently applying this year. I've noticed they're very technologically savvy for the most part, but one difference is their knowledge of email. They're not as used to using email. And I noticed that their inbox in Gmail is inundated right now with so many different emails from different colleges right now. They're getting lots of marketing messages. So the emails that are coming in from the colleges that they're specifically interested in are sometimes buried. So what we did was we utilized the filter and labeling functionality within Gmail to make it easy for them to find those emails and not miss anything. So I thought I'd walk folks through the steps to create that label within Gmail. All you have to do is go up to the search bar within Gmail and then click on the filtering icon. Then in the From section, you can type in the domain name for whatever school they're applying to. For instance, we typed in unc.edu, and then you click on Create Filter. And there's a variety of different boxes you can select, such as starring it and making sure it lands in their primary folder. But the most important one is to click on Apply the Label. You click on that box, and then it'll have you choose the label or create your own. We created their own specific label. We called it Colleges I'm Applying to. And we also clicked on the box that says also apply the filter to matching conversations, which lumped in all the old emails that matched that domain into this label. We did this for every single college that they plan to apply to. And then once we set up this label, when you can click on the label itself and you can color code it so that once the messages come into their inbox, they now get this label and they're color coded so they stand out very nicely in their inbox. They also can click on that specific label and it serves as a separate folder. They can pull up each of those emails very easily. This way they're not missing any important communication. And they can also open every single one since we know schools are tracking demonstrated interest. So that's a way to make sure that we're staying on top of that also. Later on, we'll create new labels for schools that they're accepted to and ultimately even a label for the school that they accept, because I've heard stories where students might have missed a very important deadline or a deposit just because it was buried in their email. So I thought I'd share this tip if you're using Gmail to add in this labeling functionality to make things easier with email. I hope it's helpful to some of the folks in the community.
Friends, I'm here with Susan Tree and Kate Stricklan. Hi, Susan. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Mark. Good to be with both of you.
Yeah. So we are going to get into talking about the NACAC conference in a second, of which Susan and Kate just got back from. But this is Kate's first time on our podcast, and so I've asked her to just give a little bit of an overview. We're excited to have you, Kate.
It is great to be here. I have been a longtime listener, so the chance to contribute is such a welcome opportunity. So, hi, my name is Kate Stricklan. I am the Senior Assistant Director of Application Review at the University of Colorado Boulder. Earlier in my career, I have been a high school Latin teacher, an admissions essay consultant, and an alumni interviewer for my alma mater. I live in the great state of Colorado with my family, which includes 2 children, one in 5th grade and one a freshman in high school.
Oh boy, you're starting off.
I know, it has begun.
Well, that's another reason why I wanted you to come on from time to time, is because, Some of us are greatly involved in this work, Susan, myself, some others. And our kids are now through that process. And it is nice to have people who are living it in the middle of it. So Lisa's got a high schooler. And, Julia has a student that's very much going through this process as well. But that fresh perspective is really good. So what's your alma mater? You said you did alumni work for your alma mater.
So I went to Columbia,
Okay.
and when I lived overseas, I got to interview international applicants. The
Mhm.
interview piece is a small but integral part of the admissions process. So it was amazing to learn about these students who some were American students abroad, some were international citizens, and kind of, get to give that feedback back to the admissions HQ.
Kate, do you ever find when you're listening that some answers sound like, well, that's a liberal arts college, but we do things differently here? Do you ever find yourself as a podcast listener?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There was during our case studies, I thought that it was such a neat thing that Hillary said. Like, she said something like, sometimes when I know that 12 files are coming in from a particular high school, I'll hang on to them. And I'm like, wow, like I love that she has that depth of relationship and kind of the volume capability to do that. But I'm like, we read by territory, of course, but we need to read as they come in. But yeah, so we have pretty different processes. I have so much respect for the liberal arts perspective, but I hope to bring a different angle to us.
Yeah, that's part of why, we wanted to have you on, just to bring that National University R1 research school. We know sometimes some things are different. And one of my fears sometimes is that when we explain something, our listeners think, oh, that's the way that it is, when we know there's so many different approaches that schools use, right? From admitting by the numbers, right? Talk to us a little bit about like some of your roles and responsibilities that you have at CU. Like, do you travel? Do you have a territory? You want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I previously had a territory when I was on the first year counselor team. So I had Texas and southeastern Colorado. But I don't have a territory anymore. My main focus is to ensure the efficiency and accuracy and integrity of our file review process.
Ah,
I mainly focus on the first year side, but also help out with transfer and international when I can. And yeah, we've gone up about 25% in the last 2 years. We're over 70,000 apps a year now, so it is never a dull moment over here.
so you don't have a travel territory. Are you reading and rating files, or are you just training admission officers on reading now?
I read certain micro populations of files go directly to me and only me. And I get the chance to, like last year, I attended 2 case studies events. I love case studies so much. That was kind of a real thrill for me. But I don't generally cover other folks' territories these days.
Good, good, good.
When you
Awesome.
say micro territories, Kate, are those certain VIP categories or students with particular backgrounds or
I should say it's things like the military and veteran files and homeschool, GED, folk like micro populations, I should
That's great,
say.
though. Great
Yeah.
question, Susan.
hmm
yeah,
Yeah,
no, very, very interesting.
The
yeah.
narrative files, like so files that
Oh,
come in
yeah.
without grades go to me and things like that.
So, out of curiosity, I think our listeners would find this interesting. This is just an estimate, not holding you to it.
Mhm.
If you're getting 70,000 applications, like how many would be narrative and no grades? Would it be more than 300?
Oh, it's fewer than that. I think because, we're not necessarily the kind of school that a student that has had such a maybe a small personalized specialized experience would pick. We have far fewer than that,
Yeah, yeah.
but we do tend to get the same ones every year, and it's exciting to learn about these high schools. So I encourage students to apply to us because we have a good process set up in place for students like that. But it would be a big cultural shift for them to come to a large public flagship from where they've been before.
I would think you'd run into them from the ski academies. That was where
Yeah.
when I worked at Bates in Maine, it was a D3 college with a D1 ski team. And those kids often came from, Green Mountain Academy. I'm not even going to remember all of them now. Some of them were year-round schools, and some of them were just winter trimester schools. They were
Exactly.
often just narrative.
Yes, those are so fascinating to read because you get a little insight into this elite world of special athletics that hardly anyone gets to peek into. But then you'll also get the teacher that's like, but then you forgot to turn in your math homework, even though you were in Switzerland. So yeah, I
No,
love
I
those.
remember those days. St. Anne's was a big one that would give us
Yes,
that, and
that's an
Carolina
amazing
Friends out
one.
of North Carolina.
Yep,
Reading
Yep.
all
those,
of those. Yep.
you've had them for both of those, yeah. Well,
Yes, yes,
at some point we might want to have you do a segment on that. I think that could be interesting to our listeners. I'm always looking for things we haven't covered, and we haven't covered how do you read a narrative application? Is it any different? Anything, So, and
for sure.
keep
I'd
it
be
in
happy
mind.
to speak on that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, friends. So we're going to transition. Unfortunately, there was no way I could do an 8-day trip to Bermuda and then go back to NACAC. Broke my heart. At the last second, I had to cancel out. But I'd like to make our national conference. I've already got Minneapolis next year on the calendar. But Kate and Susan did go. And by the way, Counselor Connect listeners out there, we're planning on a gathering next year for Counselor Connect listeners in Minneapolis in October.
Oh,
So
good.
giving you plenty of advance notice here. But I'm just curious what stood out to you about the conference, any trends, anything you think would be of interest to our listeners. Susan, you want to go first and share something? And then Kate, you want to chime in and add any thoughts you have on the conference?
Sure. Sure. Well, and Kate and I may have some of the very same observations as well as some different ones. For me, the huge visible impact were the people who weren't there. Attendance was considerably lower, although still enormous. I think it
6,100,
was,
I heard.
yep, 6,000, but I didn't hear what the decrease had been, but attributed to two things. One, there are a fair number of colleges out there where there's a gag rule right now. There's a gag order where the college admissions leadership are not allowed to talk about really any political issues, financial issues. Some of them were there anyway, but I think some admissions directors just decided that their staff wasn't going to come and be put in a position perhaps of being asked to, share information that, they aren't at liberty to share. There were a fair number of, kind of the Ivy Plus group that were just missing, but others who only one person, a senior member of the staff, attended, as opposed to 4 or 5 members of the staff. That was pretty clear to me. I spoke to a number of those folks, and in fact, one of the sessions that I was involved with, there was an Ivy, a senior Ivy representative there from their admissions office, and all the sessions, as you know, are recorded, and then attendees get this wonderful library of recordings so we can listen to sessions that we weren't able to get to. And her institution did not allow the recording of her anytime she spoke publicly. So I think, there's maybe been a little bit of that in the past, but this was interesting and pretty widespread. I think the other big issue that I saw and that people spoke about were the impact of the financial cutbacks at universities across the country, from the ones that have been in the news, the loss of federal research funding, to, just right down the line. Lots of cutbacks at well-to-do schools, at well-to-do colleges. We're not talking about just the struggling smaller schools or, small liberal arts colleges, not well endowed, or the regional publics that are having trouble. But these were big names all across the country where there are hundreds of millions of dollars. We originally thought maybe that would be impacting graduate programming more than undergrad. But one comment that I heard repeatedly was that, and I'd love to hear Kate's take on this, that at large universities, public and private, there are going to be more graduate students shifted to teaching undergraduate courses as there is retrenchment, and that the universities are going to be looking to find other sources of employment for their research assistants who are there at the graduate level, where they've lost the funding, less research going on, funded research. The college wants to keep paying these people, so they're potentially maybe more teaching at the undergrad level. So that's a question I'm giving the kids I'm working with, the families of applicants this year, that and juniors, as they research colleges, to just politely ask about some things like that. Is that going to be a shift in the coming years as funding is compromised? There was, even NACAC, our professional association, who are the biggest cheerleaders for access to higher ed, in the country. I so admire them and always have. Our association is taking a big hit financially right now. Loss of income through the National College Fair program, even the lower attendance at a national conference. And there are going to be layoffs and cutbacks in programming. It's just going to be, belts are getting tightened everywhere in the education sector.
Susan, did you get a sense if that was, mostly related to like the NIH cuts and research funding cuts, if it was loss of international students, if it's just general birth dearth, enrollment cliff in general stuff? Did you get a sense of the causes of it at all or not? I mean, I know it's all of it and other things as well.
Yeah. No, I don't think the colleges are feeling the birth dearth that much yet. I mean, I think they're all planning on it, right?
Sure.
They're planning
gradual.
on the arc of the coming years. But what I heard was federal and state funding. I mean, look at what's going on at the UCs right now with the cuts in state funding.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars in mostly research funding, programming, DEI. Cuts are going everywhere. I think that's kind of what I heard. The international question I kept asking because I was very curious about that. And at the highly selective institutions, the ones where international students tend to know and lust after, the ones I spoke with did not experience a decline in applications last year or enrollments this fall. Because I was saying, what about the visa situation? There's no doubt that everyone's saying fewer Chinese students, more Indian students. That the mythology out there that it's going to be so much easier to get in as an international student now because of these anticipated declines, especially from China, which colleges did not agree with. Maybe they wouldn't have told me if they had, but the small liberal arts colleges are the ones where I heard some comments about international kids deciding not to enroll this fall who had paid deposits, or kids deferring, or kids who were enrolled not being able to return or choosing not to return. So I didn't hear that from the big guns, but from a couple of the smaller, even the very well-known liberal arts colleges.
Sure. Well, the numbers are way down for international grad students, way down. Yeah. So that does impact budget. And that could also be linked to the cutting of the funding, right? If you're coming over to be a researcher and they cut your program. So anyway.
And they're just consolidating the use of research money, but then eliminating PhD programs. I mean, look at the University of Chicago and other very distinguished scholarly universities.
We talked on the podcast how Penn had gone out with acceptances and then
Yeah.
rescinded them after they'd gone out because, the program may not be there. So it was pretty bad. Kate, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, that was so interesting to hear Susan's perspective. This was my first time attending
Oh,
NACAC,
then that's a
and
fresh perspective.
yeah, very fresh. You're getting my fresh takes. Um, so it's interesting to hear you say that numbers were down because to me, I'm like, it feels huge. Like I've been to the Common App conference, and that's only like a couple hundred folks. So I was like, this is massive. I would definitely agree that there, especially in the main stage sessions, there's, like a shroud over everything. Like it was definitely trying to not pretend that it's not tough times in our field right now, but it was also coming at it with humor and grace and hope, I would say.
Absolutely.
So because it was my first time, I went all in on the sessions. So I'm happy to share things that like
Yeah,
surprised
yeah.
or
Share a couple
interested
of
me.
sessions that you found valuable.
Yeah. Let's see. One thing that just surprised me, I went to one called Beyond the Price Tag, Conveying Institutional Value.
Mhm.
And I figured that was going to be full of private universities, maybe not the most on students' minds, like the schools that have a higher price tag, but aren't everyone's first choice. But they asked for a show of hands who was public or private in the room, and it was almost all public institutions in there. So I don't know, but I was wondering if that was pointing towards like a lot of universities wanting to increase their out-of-state population, which comes with a higher price tag, and maybe trying to learn strategies for how to um, recruit that type of
And did
student.
the conversation go there, using regionals or penetrating more out of state funding? Was that some of the conversation?
No, that it was more just like it was more marketing instead of like admission strategy. But yeah, everyone was kind of shocked at who was in the audience in that one. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, I want to talk about the demographic cliff. So I was in two sessions where they showed the map that had like the plus or minus percentage anticipated for each state over the next kind of 15 years. Um, I personally didn't realize how stark the differences were across the country and like by region. So, whereas the Southeast is expected to grow, my area, the West, is projected to lose 20% overall. Um, what jumped out at me there was that it's Illinois was projected to lose 32% of its population.
Wow.
And I don't know, that could be not accounting for Chicago. It could be other parts of the state, but I feel like Chicagoland is a lot of institutions, like one of their top regions to recruit from. So that made me think, I wonder if folks are going to have to really rethink their strategy about recruiting students from greater Chicago in the coming years. One more thing about the sessions that I thought your listeners might like, Mark, is I attended the NACAC like trends in college admissions, and they showed a chart that had, according to a 2023 or 4 NACAC student survey, what do you think are the top elements in your college admissions packet that are most important to colleges as assumed by students? And then they showed a NACAC state of admissions report where colleges said these are like the top elements in rank order of what we're really looking at. And then so of course grades were at the top, but for colleges, it was more grades in rigorous courses, whereas students just said grades in general were important. And then something that was really surprising was students weren't factoring in that academic rigor in school context is quite as important as most admissions offices feel. And then personal character traits were really high on the list for factors that are important to admissions offices, whereas students hadn't ranked that as highly. And then students put extracurriculars significantly higher in the minds of admissions counselors than admissions offices did.
And
So
testing as well. And didn't students also have testing higher? Because
students had testing higher. I thought testing I wasn't sure what to make of that just because so many schools are test optional now that it would necessarily be lower in an admissions office surveys ratings. But yeah, students thought test scores were much more important than offices reported. Yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating.
back to your comment on sort of enrollment cliff. I went to a session last year at the LA conference on that, and the thing that really hit me last year was there's another enrollment cliff coming, right? Because this always happens. There's a decrease in births when finances are tough. So right now we're experiencing the great financial crisis, 07, 09, but births went way down in COVID.
Yeah.
So you can just fast forward 18 years and know that 2038 to 2040 is going to be another decrease in terms of the challenges. All right, friends, this concludes the first segment of the NACAC conversation. We'll pick it up next week. We continue to talk about more takeaways from the NACAC conference, and then just kind of bounce around to a number of different topics. I just let the recording roll because I felt the things we were talking about would be of interest to you. So you'll get that next week. But after this, the final segment of our case studies.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Hopefully this exercise gives some insight into the fact that, again, this is not cut and dry. So harkening back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast episode, this is not a simple process. Everyone has opinions, and this is exactly why we have multiple people in the room making decisions on a file. If you just had one person in a vacuum making these decisions, that wouldn't be they wouldn't be able to take in all the nuances of a file or contribute their different things that they notice. Even within this small group of just us right here, we all had different opinions and thoughts on the essays, on the letters, on the transcript. We all had different things we liked or didn't like about each part of each applicant's file. And that's why it's important to do it in a committee. And that's why institutions really emphasize the use of committees with diverse perspectives and backgrounds represented within those committees, because everyone will share and contribute with those different perspectives.
For sure. I want to keep recording in case there are questions that you guys have that you want to discuss, or if you want to talk about the individual students who you would advocate for and why you would advocate for them. I just want to be able to have that discussion, and we'll keep recording so that in case there's, insight that would be helpful to share with listeners, we have that. So let me just start with the first question. As you sort of step away from having read all three of these, is there a student who you feel like, wow, was it easy? Like, is there a student who's like an easy yes and you want to be able to advocate for them? And if so, who are they and why would you advocate for them? Fawn, yeah.
I will say I totally get committee-based evaluations, because when I was doing this on my own, I was having a harder time figuring out. But when we did it all together, I have a much clearer decision in my head.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah. I think of it like that Swiss cheese effect where, when you put all the layers of Swiss cheese together, you end up covering all the holes. And that's sort of how I feel about committee-based evaluation. Yeah, Nishant.
Are we gonna say like the ones that we would advocate for, or are we
Go for it.
just
I'd love to hear who you would advocate for and why.
Yeah, so it would be Layla for the most part, right? Like she hit all the points in terms of being someone who was very strong in their academics, had that well-rounded student kind of school experience, and at the same time she was somebody who was a part of a community and actually helped create those communities. So I would definitely advocate for her.
And I think she's an interesting case because if I remember, her grades were slightly lower, maybe. I mean, she wasn't the strongest academically in terms of like her GPA or sort of the raw grades. And so I think that it's it's really good to be able to see a student in their full context. I think that it helps allay the sort of fears of parents or students that they have to have absolutely perfect grades in order to be a really compelling applicant, which we know after looking through these examples that actually you don't have to be perfect academically to be compelling, right?
Right. So Layla did have most A's than some of the other ones, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like especially starting out, she had a few B's.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have gone a totally different direction, like for me. And I think maybe some of it, I'll admit, my background growing up, one of 11 kids, I had to work from the time I was 14. I totally would have gone with Elena. She couldn't do all the things that everybody else did. Like there's not time in the day for her to be able to do all those things. And yet she still showed leadership. She had interest. She made connections. She seemed out of all of them the most liberal arts kind of student that there were of the three. Yeah, she didn't have as many impressive extracurriculars, but her high school didn't have as many options. I think there were 46 kids in her class or something like that. So she's not going to have all those opportunities, and yet she made the most of what was offered to her within her high school while also doing all those things with her family.
Yes, that makes sense. I think I got Alana and Layla mixed up. I was thinking of the opposite profiles for the two of them.
Yeah.
Fawn, you had your hand up.
Oh, I agree with Mary. I would have chosen Alana as well to advocate for. Should we say all of three of ours, or we're going to go step by step?
I'm fine with
what
doing
our
it
decisions
either way.
are.
Yeah. What did you think about the other two?
I would have waitlisted Layla and denied Alan.
Okay. Yep. I think that's probably where I would have fallen if I were in your shoes also. That makes sense to me. Nishant, yeah.
So I would have waitlisted Elena from New York just because of the geographic distance as well. And then I would have denied Alan.
Okay.
I'm with Fawn, actually. I had Alana as an admit. I had Layla as a waitlist, actually, because I don't think she's coming. And Alan was a deny. But I had a question for you guys. And it's something that Mary said that sort of resonated with me too. So I'm a first generation college student. And so I'm reading the different candidates, and they're all great for different reasons. But she obviously resonated with me based on just purely my own personal circumstance. So how do you, as admissions officers, when you're reading through applications, sort of balance your own, I'll call it a bias for the lack of a better word, with something, let's say, like an institutional priority, like, oh, we want to bring in more kids from the Northeast or from the Southeast or some other institutional priority. Like, does that bleed over? Do you have to sort of think about that in a more critical way? Like, how does that come into play? If that makes sense, I'm not sure if I'm articulating it right.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, bias training is how we push back against it. I mean, Kate and Grace, you guys have bias training in your offices, I imagine, as part of your reader training. Do you want to talk about what that's like or how you push back against biases?
Yeah, I can share that. So when I was reading Alan's application, I'm from the DC area. He's from Baltimore. I saw that he was in an activity called It's Mathletics. And in the DC area, we had a quiz bowl thing that would be on Saturday morning TV called It's Academics. And I also attended CTY. So I always ask myself when I encounter something that seems familiar or something that seems incredibly unfamiliar to me, you say to yourself, if I didn't know this piece of information, would I change my mind about the student, or would I make the same conclusion about the student? And with CTY, like Hillary said, that is one of the strong pre-college programs that requires merit to get in. So I felt that was a benefit that I knew that, but I didn't take that piece of information any farther than that with him. But yep, we do several hours of bias training with our teams, and it's just knowing those things, like to interrupt that little thought train in your head when something's triggered as familiar or really alien to you. and start to look at things more in that kind of pure vacuum or in the context of the student rather than, you got to just put your context aside.
Yeah.
And then
And
one follow-up
I've
question, I'm sorry, one follow-up question if I can. It's along the same lines, I think, but maybe not. For Alana, because I think Nishant raised this too. She's coming from, New York's pretty far, 3,000 miles away. She's leaving a fairly close-knit family behind who really depend upon her. Just as admissions officers, let's assume you were going to admit her, just for the sake of this discussion. At that point, are you saying to yourselves, we want to admit her, but we want to make sure that she knows what she's getting into? So do you like have how does that? I don't know if I'm making sense here, but she's gonna be part of the community. We want to be supportive of her if we're admitting her, right? And so are you thinking proactively at that point in the admissions process to say, hey, we want to make sure we have a counselor lined up for her or advisor who's very sensitive to the fact that her family really needs her and she's 3,000 miles away? Are you thinking about introducing her right away to other first generation students or a faculty advisor who works with first generation students? I'm just saying from an admission standpoint, when you're thinking, okay, we're going to admit her, but then what? Like, what do you guys do in that situation, if anything?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think part of this is trusting the student and that they did their research and that they are applying to us thoughtfully and that when they are admitted that they're making their decision thoughtfully. We do think about that. Please know that, but not in the sense of, oh, I don't know if we should admit this student, more in the sense of, I really, really hope that this student, because we love them, we want them to come. Yes, they're far, they have a close-knit community, but we want them based on everything in their file. And we hope that they have truly done their research. We have the support systems, we have what we can do once they get here. But I think one of the fascinating things about admission and enrollment management in general is it's one of the only industries in the world, literally in existence, where it is a back and forth transaction where a student puts themselves out there, right, and says like, hey, I'm interested. We then review them and say, we're interested too. And then it goes back to the student to make their final decision. That's not something you normally see in the world. And the fact that we are putting so much trust in the student after we say yes for them to then say yes back. That's honestly all we can really do. We just hope that they read our emails saying we have first gen support. We have a textbook lending library. We can help support you with flights or whatever it might be that school provides. And it's on the student at that point to make sure that they do their research. So it's a lot of hope. It's a lot of trust on both sides. It's trust on the student side also that we actually do provide that support and infrastructure to make sure that they can succeed. But yeah, there are multiple situations, whether a student is first gen, has a close family, whatever the situation might be, but we're just hoping they did their work too.
I think that the three of us are in really privileged positions at our institutions because our institutions are able to support students who are coming from backgrounds where they might need extra support, right? And so we can sort of lean on that, these support networks are here at our institution. And as long as the student is willing to take advantage of the things that we tell them are available to them, then probably they'll be fine. And so, yeah, it does go back to trusting the student. I don't know. I'm sure that is aspirational for some schools and that not all schools. You think about some of the challenges that colleges are facing across the US right now. And lots of times those sort of supportive offices on campus might be cut. We're really lucky that that's not true at the places where we work. And so we can go into this with some confidence that what the student needs is here. The other thing I was going to say was about the bias training. One thing that we're trying to do with our partners when we're reading is to name our biases, to say it out loud. Wow, I'm feeling an extra sort of attachment to this student already because they did youth in government and I did youth in government, or because they were raised in the Bay Area and that's where I'm from. And so when they talk passionately about sourdough, I understand what they're saying. And so by saying that out loud, and eventually your colleagues get to know you well enough that they can be reading with you and be like, enough with the sourdough, don't tell me that you're connected to her that way, right? You can kind of head off those biases, and that's why reading in pairs or in teams is really helpful. Yeah, fun.
I was just going to say, what Chris brought up was great. And is that one at the point of wanting to admit Alana, you would look back to see if you admitted anyone from her school previously and how they did?
I usually look at that on the front end, just to see we're able to see the whole school group from the last like 5 or 6 years, who's been admitted, who hasn't, who decided to come. And that just helps me get a sense of the context. I wouldn't necessarily use that in helping me recommend a decision for the student. How about you, Kate and Grace?
I don't have access to that. I can see in the same application cycle how some of the recommended decisions are starting to play out for that student's senior class, but I can't see how well they've done at CU.
Yeah, I can't see whether they stick, like if they've decided to transfer out or anything. I can just see if they decided to enroll. Grace?
Same. It's the same. I can see if they, how many we waitlisted, denied, accepted, how many enrolled, but I can't see beyond that.
Other questions or anything else? Did anybody not tell us who they were advocating for?
I guess
Chris
I had
Smith.
yeah. I was actually down path of Alana as well, for the admit. And this last piece that you were talking about was interesting because the one thing that was in the back of my mind a little bit was, as I was thinking candidates, I was thinking fit. Could I see them in a liberal arts environment? But then there was the preparation question, and that idea of doing really, really well, but in a situation where the resources aren't as extensive as like Layla's situation, and how one thinks about the support structure and infrastructure in place. Because, I can imagine a world where she certainly would thrive even more if she doesn't have the baggage, if you will, of all the responsibility at home, et cetera, and she can really focus. At the same time, she hasn't been in that environment yet to demonstrate it. So then it's like, how do you know, as much as you might want a student, that they will be successful ultimately, versus that idea of getting in over her head, which is the thing that, she kind of highlighted. But that was kind of where I landed. And I was actually more in the camp of, for Alan, waitlisting, and Layla, the denial. And the rationale for that was she seemed to be the most prepared, I think, in a lot of ways, but she also felt like the least liberal arts to me, in a lot of ways. She didn't have any arts in her profile, like any fine arts, anything like that, in a very resourced environment, et cetera. It just seemed biology. It struck me as like Johns Hopkins or something like that would be the place that you probably want to go, kind of a deal. But yeah, one question I have actually was, and this has been really interesting, is when you get to committee, how long do you actually have to talk about? So we spent a lot of time talking about this.
We did. Yeah, we don't have this much time, I guess, unless you're at like a Quaker school, then maybe you stay until you figure it out, right? But I don't know. How long do you guys take, Kate and Grace, in your committees?
I mean, to read a file, because I think it's also important to start there, because we also took a good amount of time to read. It can be anywhere from, I'd say, 7 to 10 minutes per file. So a lot faster than what we did today. And then in the committee, it can be anywhere from 2 minutes, 2 minutes to, it can be up to 10 minutes if we're having a really intense discussion about a student. In committee, hopefully the people that have submitted the notes on behalf of the student that they're sharing those notes for, those notes are pretty comprehensive, get to the point, and give everybody a good kind of understanding of the student, even though they haven't all read the file. And then everyone will discuss based on those notes and their quick skim through the file. There's a lot of trust in the reader or readers, right? Readers, depending on the institution. We have 2 per file, at least on at Grinnell. But there's a lot of trust on those readers that they read thoroughly, provided really good notes that highlight what needs to be noted. And sometimes the vote is very easy, like, yep, that student's great. Or, we need to talk more about that. Maybe the readers disagreed, and so there needs to be a wider discussion. So it varies, but I would say rarely is it more than 5 minutes even for a committee discussion. Like the longest I can think of has been maybe like 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, we're allowed to have we're allowed to speak as the representative for that student for it depends on how many we have to go through in a day, but somewhere between 1.5 to 2 minutes about the student. And so you really, for me anyway, I do a lot of work on the back end, prepping and looking at my own notes and the notes from other readers who've looked at the file and trying to pull together the story and make the most compelling and also the most honest case that I can about the student. So that means pulling out the great stuff about the student and also identifying the things that might give me pause. And then that gives everyone the full picture so that they can, they have the information they need when we go into a vote. Kate, I'd be really interested to hear how that works at CU, because big schools with your volume of applications has got to be so different.
Yeah, so we're a little bit different. So high application volume, but also fairly high admit rate overall, barring a few of our programs. So our applications get interacted with, touched, read by multiple people, but we don't have committee in the sense that a liberal arts college does for most students.
Yeah. So each reader is able to see the any notes that are made on the file. If someone else is touching it, they can see what was said before. Okay.
Yep, you can see the full history.
Yeah, that's cool. Fun, yeah.
Well, actually, Kate answered part of my question, because that's what I was wondering. If you guys can make decisions before you go to committee, or every single student that you want to admit has to go to committee. I guess for Kate, they make decisions on their own.
We don't have to send all of our students through committee. Some students are so strong that they can be automatically recommended for admission the first time that they're read by the first pair of readers. Sometimes they're sort of on the bubble, and so they go to a subcommittee, and the subcommittee will have, a very long Excel spreadsheet of lots and lots of students who they have to go through, and they can make some decisions to recommend a student be admitted and recommend that some be denied. And then there are going to be or waitlisted or deferred. And then there will be some who are still on the bubble when they're in subcommittee, and those are the ones who end up going to committee. So our students, who we all see as a full admission committee, are very much like on the bubble. These are the ones that nobody else felt comfortable making a decision about, whether it was in the initial pair, in the subcommittee, which is usually like 3 to 5 readers together. Sometimes the dean and director will kind of shuffle students around and make some decisions based on what prior readers have said. And even they haven't been able to decide. Those are the ones who are going to end up with the full committee. How about you, Grace?
It's basically the same. And I just want to, again, remind everyone that there's always at least 2 readers, if not more, on every file. And even for the students, I assume it's the same at CC, but even for the students that might be, again, so strong that they can immediately put into that admit box, they are still reviewed by either a dean or director before they are put into that box. So they're not just moved based on the reader comments. Then, even though it might not be the full committee, there is another person or another 1 or 2 people who are in the highest leadership positions within the office that generally will give the final approval before a student is even moved into that, regardless of how strong they are, just to make sure that nothing was missed. So lots of eyes on every file.
Yeah, it's really hard to sneak a student in. You can't really. Or to sneak a student out also, right? Like if a student is has a really, really strong academic profile, but personally you're like, oh, this student is not going to add anything, even though they have straight A's, so I'm going to recommend deny for them. Well, their strong academic profile is going to get caught in sort of the filter at some point and keep them from going straight to be denied. Like there are so many. That was one thing I had to get used to when I started here, because I would feel really frustrated and nervous that students who I really liked, but who didn't have super strong academic profiles, who I sort of had to recommend deny for them or had to recommend defer for them based on sort of our rubric. But I really wanted to make sure that they were going to get looked at again. And it took me a while to get used to the idea that like, there's going to be a filter that is going to catch students. And so nobody's getting either in or out without getting another set of eyes or two on their file.
That was amazing. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, you guys. I think this is going to be really helpful for our listening audience. And I hope that it was fun for you. I know it's a long day. That was 2.5 hours of sitting on a Zoom. My bottom is sore. I don't know about yours, but I'm really glad that you were willing to sit through this with us and you asked great questions. So thanks so much for being here. And special thanks to Grace and to Kate for taking time out of their days. I know, Grace, you're leaving for a big international trip in like 3 days or something. Is that right? How long are you going to be gone?
Yeah, I leave next Friday.
Okay.
I'll be gone until late September.
Wow. And how many countries are you visiting?
4, 5.
Okay.
Yeah, all East
Asia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And Kate, what's coming up on your plate for your work? What's this time of year look like for you?
Right now, I'm starting to read spring applicants. I read my first file for spring this morning, and really preparing for the reading season. So updating guidelines for admission, updating training materials, and making sure that we have all the folks on board that we need to do this great work.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was really great to meet all of you, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing.
Thanks.
On Thursday's episode, Julia will join me to answer a question from a listener. And friends, then you'll have the final part of the interview with Dan Chambliss, author of the book, How College Works. And then we'll hear from Lisa, who's profiling some of the colleges she visited recently on her trip to New England. So far, we've had 2 that she's talked about, but there's a couple more. You got to tune in on Thursday to see which college she's talking about this week. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what's going to determine your career success. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.